Hi there, esteemed audience, and welcome to another episode of Middle Grade Ninja. I'm Rob Kent. As you know, I'm the author of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees, the greatest novel ever written by men, and the sequel, Banneker Bones and the Alligator People, and the upcoming yet to be revealed third, Banneker Bones and the You'll Know Soon adventure. These are the stories of an 11-year-old biracial boy genius detective and his cousin as they do amazing, awesome things like hunt down giant robot bees with EMP blast rifles on jetpacks, hunt down alligator people, and hunt down, we'll find out. What will that third thing be? If you're curious to get started, both the Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees and Banneker Bones and the Alligator People are available as paperbacks and ebooks. Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees is also available as an audiobook, and the ebook is free to download whenever you're listening to this, whenever you're watching this, wherever fine ebooks are sold. You heard that correct. Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees is available for free. What are you waiting for? You watch or listen to the show, you like me, you're curious, you want to know if I can write. This is your opportunity to go check that one out. Under the super secret pen name Robert Kent, I've written some novels for older readers, such as the young adult novel All Together Now a Zombie Story, and All Right Now a Short Zombie Story. If you like your zombies slow and rotting and needlessly violent, which is exactly how I like my zombies, if you're a fan of The Walking Dead, you're going to love All Together Now a Zombie Story. If you say, Rob, I'm all for horror, but I'm worried that young adult won't be adult enough for me, I got you, esteemed audience. Wait till you check out The Book of David, also by Robert Kent. That is a 5-volume serial horror novel, and it is absolutely crazy. If you listen to me on the show, I'm a nice, mild-mannered ninja. I'm never profane, always polite. Get that out of your head. The Book of David is written by a madman. I don't know his countdown till I run for political office and switch that to a pen name. But until then, you can get the Book of David by Robert Kent. All 5 volumes are available, both as individual serial novels as well as a compilation. The first book, the Book of David, Chapter 1, is available to download as an ebook for free whenever you're watching or listening to this, wherever fine ebooks are sold. So check that out. Coming up on the show, stay tuned. We are going to be talking with Sharon M. Draper. Her episode will air on Thursday. We'll be talking to author Dan Gutman. His episode will be airing on Saturday. And then we've got many other extraordinary guests lined up. If you want to know who's coming to the show, you can keep tabs with everything we're doing at middlegradeninja.com. Tonight, I couldn't be more exciting. We are welcoming one of my most favoriteest authors of all time and our, to date, only returning champion, our very first guest, the guest without whom none of this would be possible because all the other authors only ever said, yes, I'll come on your show because Laura Martin came on and did such a great job. Esteemed audience, put your hands together wherever you're. Maybe you're in your car, maybe you're at the gym. Stop what you're doing. Quick round of applause for author Laura Martin. Laura, how are you this evening?
I'm so great. Thank you so much for having me back again. It's an honor.
I couldn't be more. You know, I talk to you. I never get tired of talking to you. We are friends and critique partners in real life. So I never, more than a couple of months goes by without me being able to see you.
Mm-hmm. It's great. It's funny because when I was dreaming about getting published, I was stalking your blog years and years ago. I had no idea we even lived in the same town. So it's a very small world that now I'm in the same writing group as you.
Well, you heard it, esteemed audience. Follow your dreams. Read my blog. Move to my town. Join my writing group. You too can enjoy the bliss that is currently being experienced by Laura Martin.
Right down your street.
Laura, remind esteemed audience who the heck you are. For those poor fools that were foolish enough they didn't listen to the first episode, give them a quick rundown of who you are and how great you are.
All right. So I am an author, but prior to being an author, I was a 7th grade language arts teacher here in Indianapolis for about 6 years before kind of taking a break to do the stay-at-home mom thing and the author thing. I have 3 young kiddos, 5, 3, and 1. So life is busy right now, and then I do my author stuff basically when they're sleeping. My first series that ever came out with HarperCollins is called The Edge of Extinction. It's a 2-book series, mainly because I wrote 1 book and they said it's too long for middle grade, break it into 2, which is why the first book has a major cliffhanger ending that even I hate myself for a little bit. And then it finishes up with Codename Flood. So those are my first 2 books that came out. And then my, not most recent, because Hoax for Hire comes out tomorrow, but Float was my next one, which was kind of different from Edge of Extinction. These were kind of stories that I'd heard my whole life my dad tell. He had this kind of wild and crazy childhood, so I handed it off to a kid named Emerson who happens to float. And then my newest book, which is why I get to be back today, is called Hoax for Hire. And it's the first book that you ever helped critique and kind of help on its way to its publishing path. So this one is really exciting. I'm excited for it, mainly because I feel like I've waited forever for this book to hit the shelves. The way publishing works, we had this one finished over 1.5 years ago, right? Like the last time you saw this was almost 2 years ago. It just takes that long to kind of get it through the pipeline. But Hoax for Hire is about a family who has made their living pulling off these hoaxes. So my idea actually started when I was at Butler University. I had this idea of like, what if you could contribute every awful thing to one family? And I originally thought I was going to write this story about these like villains, you know, this like society of villains. And then it kind of morphed into, well, what if every kind of weird, unexplainable Bigfoot sighting, Lochness Monster sighting, what if there was one family behind the scenes kind of pulling those strings? So it's a story about 2 boys, and they are both in the McNeil family. They're brothers. And the older brother, Curtis, is all in on the hoaxing lifestyle. He wants to be exactly what their family legacy has kind of led them to be. But Grayson wants out. He thinks it's weird that they have Bigfoot feet in the basement. He doesn't want to have this life of lies that's not exactly legal. The problem is they get pulled into this huge sea monster hoax that their dad sets up, and then something happens to dad, and they kind of have to swoop in and figure it out. So that's Hoax for Hire. It's much more similar to Edge of Extinction than I would say Float is. Float's kind of my departure book. That's a little different. My Edge of Extinction fans, I think, are really going to like Hoax for Hire.
Should we say that Float is up there?
I always call it my funny book. Like if you're gonna pick a book because it's funny, that's the book that you pick. My other ones have some humor in them too, but they're much more action adventure driven. Where Float is much more character development, humor driven, I would say, which is different for me because I would not consider myself a funny person. My husband always tells me you're a lot funnier when you write than in like real life, which I don't think is a compliment, but it's also true. I'm funny when I can think about it for a really long time.
I disagree. You make me laugh on a regular basis. Although I've got to say that Hoax for Hire is I've definitely laughed more than once before I was done. So there's plenty of humor in this book as well as action and excitement, and the opportunity for us to talk about all kinds of weird stuff.
Oh, I know. When I pitched it, I just saw it on your face. It's like, how did I not think of it? Because you're so into all that stuff. I know one of your main questions you ask everybody is, have you ever seen a UFO? So the fact that I did the book about all the weird things, it should have been your.
Crushed me. I was like, no, it's the book I didn't know I was gonna write, and now I'm not gonna. In a way, it's good that you and I are critique partners, because life's too short to get to all the ideas I want to do. So if you keep doing the books that I really wanted to write, but I just didn't have time to get to, I at least get to help you launch them into the world a little bit and get it. And if I can't write it directly, at least be adjacently part of it.
You said the book Big Magic.
Uh-huh.
She talks about how she thinks ideas are transferable. So maybe you transferred that one to me by hanging out in the same writing group. Who knows?
Yeah, because there's not anything on Hoax for Hire that I don't talk about on a regular basis in real life. People think this is an act. I really am that far out there. In fact, let's start, because we've been friends for a long time, and I've never actually asked you directly. Laura Martin, have you ever seen a flying saucer, and do you believe in them?
I have not, but I wouldn't want to live in a world where there's not the possibility of one, if that makes sense, which is one of the big themes in the book. I love the idea of the mysterious being out there, that we haven't figured everything out, especially in this world where, you can Google an answer in 2 seconds. I want there to be mystery in the world. I want there to be monsters and lakes and creatures we haven't discovered yet. And, possibly UFOs out there who are going to pay a visit. I don't want to live in a world without mystery. So yes, I believe that there's so many possibilities and so many things we have not figured out yet.
Oh, they're out there. And now that you've published this book that does indeed have a flying saucer, I've got the art cover, so you can't see it as well, but it's got the flying saucer hanging up there.
Keep the flying saucer on the cover.
You are now easy pickings, madam. When the aliens are looking around, they're, all right, who can we abduct that no one's going to believe? You're for sure on the plus column now. So,
got myself
so people will just say, well, she must be marketing her book. That's why she's saying she's been abducted. And who will you be able to tell?
Author's note. I talk about how I hope that someday we, get a really good picture of Nessie, or we find a Bigfoot. And I said I'll be right there handing out my bookmarks because girls got to publicize books somehow. So I'll be there going, hey, do you want to read more about this? I have a book about that.
You have the most unpredictable book tour coming up that you could possibly get to.
Mm-hmm.
Outstanding, but it'll always be relevant because somebody's always going to be seeing something odd.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go down the list a little bit. Okay, so UFOs, you haven't seen one. How about cryptids in general? Have you seen a Bigfoot, a Sasquatch, anything?
I have not, but I grew up. My family. My great-grandfather built a lake home up in Monticello, Indiana. It's not really a lake, it's a dammed-up river. It's muddy river, but my entire childhood I grew up with my dad telling me stories about the giant catfish that live in there. And I think it was part legend, part just scare your kid, So I think that's one of the things I was always I kept pushing him for details. Well, how do you know there's these giant catfish? And he had these stories about how, oh yeah, they pulled out one that was bigger than a man and all these stories about these giant catfish. So just that mysterious element, I guess, I've always been intrigued by. So I remember the first time I heard about the Lochness Monster, I was like, wait, there's a monster that lives, it's just that mysterious. So no, I've never seen a cryptid, unfortunately. Wouldn't that be a great little headliner in my book? But that's also part of cryptids, is so very few people have seen them, and the people that we have eyewitness accounts sometimes aren't believed, which is why the whole waters get really muddy when you get into cryptozoology, which made research really tricky when it came to researching. When I did the dinosaur research for Edge of Extinction, it was much more cut and dry with what scientists agreed on for certain dinosaurs and what they might look like, sound like, that kind of thing. Whereas you start researching Bigfoot and you have a very small percentage of reliable sources out there and a lot of kind of people just guessing and formulating, and it's hard to figure out who's real and who's a hoax, which was funny because I'm writing a book about hoaxes. So the research was kind of falling down a rabbit hole a little bit.
It's kind of, you win either way, right? Because if it's a hoax, great, you need to know more about good hoaxes. And if it's not a hoax, great, you're curious and you're looking for the monster. So either way, it's win-win, right?
Stories I came across, I worked into HOAX for HIRE. So many of the cool cryptid stories that I heard, like the U-28 monster, and my favorite is the Silver Lake monster that I kind of worked into the book, that it was this real hoax, that this guy on Silver Lake, a hotel owner, did this huge hoax with the sea monster to bring tourists to his town, and it worked. The town went bananas. And then a few years later, his hotel burned down, and they found the remains of this sea monster creation in the attic. Burned to smithereens, which is one of the reasons why in HOAX for HIRE they say that they never get rid of their hoaxing stuff. They just store it because they're worried about that happening again. And so I weave that into the whole family's history. But this idea that people are just intrigued by the unknown. If you mentioned the Lochness Monster, people go, to Scotland just to visit the lake where there might be a monster. We're just intrigued by that kind of stuff, which is really fun.
Saw a documentary. I can't remember the name of it because God knows. The documentary is, I don't even know if that's the right term. Crazy YouTube video is what I watched. But it was about Bigfoot specifically. And at one point they interviewed a guy that was not that into it. They mentioned to him, hey, we see that you're always the last on the herd when we of the group. That when you go out and you look for, they call it squatching, when they go out and you're looking for the Sasquatch. And he's like, yeah, well, the way I figure it, if we find a Sasquatch, that would really be something. But worst case scenario, I'm out here with my buddies every weekend and we're camping, and it's great. Yeah. Yes, that is the right attitude, sir. You're having your best life.
Absolutely. Well, what's funny is I wasn't, just like with Edge of Extinction and dinosaurs, I wasn't super into cryptids prior to writing this book. I kind of came across it by accident when I was teaching. We had this whole nonfiction curriculum that we were teaching called Plugged into Nonfiction, where I had a class of 30 kids, and they gave me 7 books of each book. And I was supposed to use that to teach my kids how to read nonfiction, and they weren't supposed to read the whole thing, and we were only supposed to spend a little time on it. And I didn't think it was the best idea in the whole world, to say the least, but they didn't ask my opinion. And a lot of the books were kind of iffy that we were given, except for this one, which is called Tales of the Cryptids, which is my absolute favorite. You can actually still see I've got my classroom sticker on the binder. I hijacked this one from my classroom, and I still have it. But it's the science behind all the mysterious creatures that may or may not exist. And when we cracked this book open and we started talking about the history of Bigfoot and the Lochness Monster sightings, my kids just like perked up. Their eyes got wide and they were hooked. So I shut my classroom door, and instead of spending like 30 minutes, we spent about 3 days on this book. Looking up the wacky YouTube clips, we watched things on, Lauren Coleman, who's kind of like the lead expert on cryptozoology. We watched him do interviews about Bigfoot, about Lochness Monster. We were doing all these debates. And in the middle of teaching this book, I had the idea for HOAX for Hire. Now, I wouldn't write it for like 5 years later. So I just wrote it in the margin of my teacher planner. I told my kids to do an activity. I went over my desk and I said, what if one family was responsible for it all? Like, what if one family was behind all of these things? And then that idea kind of sat on the back burner. I wrote Edge of Extinction, I wrote Float, and I was going, okay, what am I going to write next? And then I pulled up I have a accordion file of all my random ideas that I just shove in there, not organized at all. It's a hot mess. And when I need a new idea, I just start pulling out ideas. Sometimes it's notes on my phone. I open that up and I have all my random ideas in there too. And I found that one. I was like, oh yeah, I had that really cool idea about cryptids. And what's funny is I've actually contacted Kelly Milner-Halls, who wrote the book, and said, hey, so you wrote the book that inspired my book. Can I send you a copy? And so we've had this whole email exchange. And she's so excited to get a copy of the book because I mentioned this book in the author's note about where the idea came from. And so she's going to send me her new cryptid book that's coming out. So it's exciting too. So I'm like, maybe someday we can sit on a panel together and talk about weird things. You can come too. You'd fit right into the panel.
I'll just be in the crowd cheering. That's going to be a heck of a show. Well, somebody pointed out to me once that and I want to get back to your idea folder, but first I want to ask you about this. Somebody pointed out to me that if they went out and they caught Bigfoot, it would just be like an extra big, monkey or an ape they'd find out things about it, they classify it, and it would just be something you'd go visit at the zoo. Except for the crazier theories where it's like there's a whole secret society of them out there. They have, like Wakanda technology that's more advanced than what we have. I mean, if you really dig down the rabbit hole, that stuff gets really nuts. But assuming basically what looks like is it the Zapruder film or is that JFK? Whatever the film is of Bigfoot that started the whole craze where it's kind of maybe a guy in a costume, maybe not, but he's walking a little bit funny.
Right.
But if they caught that and they put it in the zoo and you took the kids on a field trip and they saw it later in the day, it would they'd be almost bored with it, or they'd be on their phones kind of half glancing on it. So what is it you think that when it's still unknown, when it's in a book about cryptids that so captivates young minds?
I kind of disagree with that. I think if we did catch a Bigfoot, I don't think it would be ho-hum. I don't think it'd be kind of Jurassic Parky where you know how they got bored with dinosaurs, like, oh, everyone's seen a dinosaur, it's got to be bigger and better. At least not initially. I think everyone would be over the moon about finding a Bigfoot. Plus, there would only be one. It'd kind of be like the pandas in Washington, D.C. It's one of those kind of special things. But as long as they're a mystery, for example, in cryptozoology, the coelacanth is the cryptid darling. It's a creature that was supposed to have been dead since the age of the dinosaurs until they spotted one on a fishing boat. And so it's kind of held up as this pinnacle of look, sometimes we find them and they're still around. So I don't know. I don't think Bigfoot will lose his appeal, especially since I don't think you'd catch enough Bigfoots to
big feet high
zoos with them. It's a one and only thing. Plus, I can't picture him doing well in captivity. But it's like when the Tasmanian devils died out. I think things can be special in their own right. I don't think it would ever be ho-hum. I don't think, if we caught, Nessie, I don't think anyone would be like, seen it. I think there's some things that because of the legend surrounding them and because of all these kids who've grown up hearing about Bigfoot, it would be a wow type thing. And I'd be contacting the zoo to see if I could sell Hoax for Hire in their gift shop.
Maybe for the first 10, 20 years, but by the time the next generation's coming up and there's always been a Bigfoot in a cage and they've already watched how many documentaries on National Geographic or wherever else, whatever app is pumping out the documentaries by then, I don't know. You know what? Write a sequel. And you convince me.
Yeah. Well, all my books, I always kind of, I write standalone books with the exception of the Edge of Extinction series. My publisher wants standalone books with a series potential to it. So I write a standalone book that can stand on its own 2 feet and be its own complete book. But if you'll notice, there's always a few kind of strings that are left untied in my books at the very end. You're kind of like, well, that never really got answered, or there kind of leads up to, it sets up for, there could totally be a book 2. With the hope that if your book goes nuts and goes bananas, you can come back and write that book too. But you haven't closed all the doors.
Do you ever write part of them or more of it just for you, even if the publisher's not interested?
I did start another Edge of Extinction book. This was before Edge of Extinction got picked up to be published. I started writing a book too, just because I wanted to see where it would go. Now, because Edge of Extinction changed so much and became 2 books, that became like, it wouldn't even connect to the book anymore. You know what I mean? Because books change so much. Float is one that I would really love to come back and write a book to. And I've debated with how many people have contacted me and wanted an Edge of Extinction book 3. Like, well, if my publisher doesn't want it, maybe I just write it and offer it up to people self-published style. So that might be something down the road eventually, because so many kids want a 3rd Edge of Extinction book. And I have it in my head already. I have such a limited writing time as it is with 3 little kids and life being as busy as it is right now, that when I do have time to write, I'm usually, writing a book, copy editing a book, or working on getting ready to publicize and launch a book. I've always got 3 balls in the air. So writing something just for kicks, I unfortunately don't have time to do that right now. I look forward to a time in my life when I do, but I think all my kids will have to be in college by that time.
Yeah, once they're in college, they'll never come around and bother you or need anything again, right?
No, hope not. We'll be far away.
It's a lifelong commitment, madam. They're always going to be needing you. And it's funny because I was rereading this one this week, last week, getting ready for our chat tonight, and I was like, well, this was 2 Lauras ago, because I've read a couple of books since then. I don't know if we're allowed to talk about them.
No, I kind of had to rearrange my brain to gear up for the launch of Hoax for Hire, with this interview, and then I'm doing a big event at the library tomorrow, because it has been so long. I've written a whole other book and copy edited a whole other book since then. I'm actually working and writing my 6th book right now. So this one's like 2 steps behind. You kind of have to remind yourself, like, okay, what do I need to do to really pump this book up?
Is it easier to get excited about it since you've had some time away from it and it's like an old friend at this point?
Yes and no. I'm always super excited about a book as I'm writing it, because it just feels like, oh, this is the really great thing. Like, this is my, my hit. This is my bestseller, my whatever. So when I'm writing it, it always feels like my favorite thing in the whole world. And now because I've had 2 more new favorite things in the whole world since then, it's hard to kind of get geared up again. But yeah, it's really exciting, especially as you start seeing reviews come in. It's interesting to see what other people think of it, because such a slim amount of people have actually read it. Even our writing group has not read it as it is now, with the exception of you. I mean, it changes a lot in the editing process. So once you start hearing what people think about it, it kind of rekindles your excitement in it, because you get to hear from your readers, which I think as an author is one of the best parts of what we do.
Obviously, this time around, it's going to be only 5-star reviews, because only a fool would publish a 4-star review. So I'm assuming it's going to be all 5-star reviews for Hoax for Hire. But on earlier books, which were also all wonderful, but where there was that one misguided individual, who lived in a human bomber type shack, that dare to write a slightly negative review. Does that period of time take some of the sting out of that a little bit, or no?
Not really. And HOAX for Hire has got great reviews so far, but I did have one line in a review that like was kind of a knife to my chest because sometimes I feel like your reviewers have a bone to pick, and it's not necessarily with your book. They're just picking it with the world in general, and they're using your book as a platform for it. And they're not judging the story, they're judging whatever. No, I purposely don't read most of my reviews. Like, I don't go on Amazon and like check out all my reviews, the good, bad, and the ugly, because it just sends me down a dark path I don't like. Either it pumps you up, makes you feel great, or it makes you feel terrible, and you want to like convince that person that you're a nice person and they shouldn't be mean like that, you know? So I try really hard not to read reviews, with the exception of like the big ones that you get from, you know, all the big reviewer places. So other than those, I really try hard not to read reviews because they do stick with me. I'm a words person. Shocker. But words have the big impact, more so than, say, you know, actions or quality time or things like that. I'm a words person. So I try to not get them in my head because they just keep going over and over and over again.
And honestly, it's kind of a paradox that it's the positive reviews. You go, yeah, okay, fine. But those negative reviews kind of stick with you. At least they do for me. Like, I could read 5 positive reviews, like, well, you're delusional. I think I was great, but that one bad one.
Yeah. Even if it's a mostly good review and they just have one line where they didn't like something, I don't know. But also, as a teacher, I learned very early that you can't make everybody happy. I used to teach, you know, 6 classes, 30 kids to a class, and I would do these surveys that would go home for their parents to kind of give me some feedback on how the reading program was going, and I would get back anywhere from like, you're making my kid read too much to you're not making my kid read enough. You can't make everybody happy. You just can't. There's no way you're ever going to write a book that every single person in the world is going to say, this is awesome. Even Harry Potter has so many people who have torn it apart for this, that, or the other thing. You just can't write the perfect book, nor do I think you should. You should write, you know, your own truth and where your own beliefs are coming from, and let the chips fall where they may.
Well, see, I thought that, but then I wrote Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Beans, and everyone in the world loves it. It's crazy.
It's on Disney, right?
I was going to say those positive reviews, not that I spend much time reading my own reviews. Goodness, no. I've gotten much better about it. But back when I was a little bit weaker and just getting my shell on, those positive reviews would do more to mess me up than the negative reviews, because, you know, somebody says how great you are and, oh, this is literature, and then you got your pages to write for the day. Like, whew, don't forget, you're somebody great. Here comes some literature. When really, that's not what got that first book to that person that's going to like it. And if you listen to them and try to write the book that you think they want, they're not going to like that second one. So you got to put all that stuff in. Reviews, they're not for you. They're tremendously helpful. God bless the reader that takes the time to leave a review. But they're not for us, the author. That's the reader's interpretation. That's their experience that they're sharing. And it really doesn't have anything to do with us.
Other people's opinions are none of your business. They just aren't. You know, they're none of your business of whether they like you or hate you. You have to keep do the best you can, basically. Leave it all in the court. I was a basketball player as a teenager, so you leave it all in the court. You do your best game you can do, and then you just stand back and hope for the best. That's I do.
And write the next book, right?
Yeah. Be okay with writing really crummy next draft because you know you can make it better.
Well, that's the other funny thing is all of my drafts, as you know, come out perfect, as though dictated from a divine source. It's amazing.
In a critique group, you know, just say you do.
Yeah, it's always a short critique session. I come in, you say, Rob, perfect again. Oh, well.
There's a middle grade cohort in our group. Up until recently, you were the only other middle grade person. So it's always fun to have another middle grade person in a critique group who knows your market well. Like you do.
I think we're overwhelming the group now, aren't we? There's 3 of us for 6 people. So we're 50% of the group. We're going to convert a couple of folks. We'll get everyone.
The middle grade cannibals. Just throw everybody up in the air. Yeah. No.
We should talk a little bit about the cannibals since we keep bringing them up. I'm going to ask you facetiously, what does a critique group do for you? How does that help improve your writing?
I think it's very hard to create in a bubble, at least for me. I like to get a sounding board, and what I discovered the best part of a critique group for me is not necessarily handing them a full manuscript. It's handing the critique group my first chunk, my first 10,000 words or 8,000 words when I'm just starting to kind of flesh out ideas for a new book, because it's almost like a mastermind where you get all these brilliant creative people in a room and the ideas just start going like popcorn. And so you start to kind of see where your novel could go, what it's missing, what it needs before you spend all the time slogging through and writing an entire manuscript. So for me, I find the most value there. That's what I did for Hoax for Hire. I actually submitted a chunk of Hoax for Hire and a chunk of another novel, which is written and complete and will probably never be published because it's young adult and I don't write young adult, so I don't know what I was doing there. But having the group look at Hoax for Hire at such an early stage really, really helped in writing the complete piece. And I feel like I was able to write it faster and write it better the first time than I would have if I had just written it on my own. Because a lot of times your critique group, especially ours, we all come from different backgrounds, different, lifestyles, different. And so you come together and you get to see not the whole world's opinions of things, but you get to see someone else's view on things that maybe you didn't see that flaw, or maybe you didn't see where this might be a bad, offensive idea, or maybe you didn't understand that this was an insensitive way to approach this topic, and your critique group can save you from screwing up, basically, and kind of be that safety net and that safe sounding board to give you the information you need. So I highly, highly recommend a writing group. You guys were my awesome writing group for Hoax for Hire and for Glitch, which is my 5th book, which will come out here next year. For Float and Edge of Extinction, I actually had a completely different writing group that came from a community writing class that I did with one of my old Butler professors. We did this community writing class. I workshopped chunks of Edge of Extinction, and then like 6 of us kind of spun off and did this own writing group for about 2 years. I was the only one who ever got published, and they all kind of fizzled around me, which is why when I first met a couple of the Cannibals at different writer events, my first year of being published, and they were talking about this writing group there, and I was the person who was like, so you have a writing group? And it's like, it's here in Indiana. Do you need anybody to join that? I very much like kind of pushed my way in and said, well, could I come? Just because I was desperate for that sounding board. I think it's so important not to, sit in a room by yourself and only bring your own life experiences to things. And your editor can help with that to some degree if you have a professional publishing house. But I think the writing group is just crucial.
Do you use beta readers beyond us?
Other than my mom, no. My mom, bless her heart, has read every single book I've ever written, including many of the ones that will never be published, multiple times. She's the person who reads my books first, more so originally to kind of check, for dumb typos or things like that before I sent it off to an agent when I was trying to land an agent, just so I didn't look dumb because I have a huge typo on page 1 kind of thing. Because once you've read your own manuscript so many times, you almost become blind to a lot of those things. So she was one of my people who's read it. When I was teaching, I had one of my teacher friends who was also a language arts teacher read a chunk of one of mine. She still asks about that book. That's my book that I wrote that I had to write to learn how to write a book and then trashed it. It was a middle grade book that was 200,000 words. It was a disaster. She read the whole thing, bless her heart. I think I gave her like a $50 Starbucks card as a thank you for it. But no, I really don't have any other beta readers.
200,000 words, you can make that into a trilogy. ready to go. And hopefully, Jody Reamer, if you're watching or listening, and you might be, ask Laura about her young adult novel. It's a great premise. I would love to see that young adult novel out and about. I won't say anything more about it until you're back on the show and we're talking about it being published.
The problem with that young adult novel is I can't make it into a middle grade novel with the premise that I have. So right now it's just going to sit on the shelf while I try to create a brand for myself in the middle grade world, which is so tricky. As you know, middle grade is a very hard market to market to. Because your readers are not the ones who are buying the books. It's their parents who are buying the books. It's mom and dad or their teacher who is kind of bringing that book to them. So it's a very tricky market to kind of put your foot in and make a name for yourself. So slowly but surely.
I mean, just keep churning out amazing books. That's a difference maker. Although this is book 4 that you're publishing, and of course you're right now writing book 6, which I assume we can talk about Glitch. We can't talk about the mysterious book 6.
Right, because I mean we can't talk about it because it's so mismatched and a mess right now. I couldn't tell you where that book is going yet. I've had to put it on hold while I copy edited Glitch and got ready to promote this guy. So that's my job tomorrow, is when I drop my 2 youngest up at preschool for 2 hours, is to attack that one again. But no, we can talk a little bit about Glitch. Glitch right now is set to come out in May of 2020, which is exciting. Especially since HOAX came out kind of at a later publishing date. I like that May publishing date because it hits summer readers so much better than the August one does. But Glitch is my first time traveling book, which I am a huge time traveler fan. I think I mentioned in the last.
Do you not count Float as a partial time traveling book?
Float has some time traveling elements, but it definitely doesn't get into time traveling as much. In Float, there's all these campers who have these different weird problems they're dealing with. Our main character floats. We've got a kid who's invisible and can't control it. And one of the kid's problems is he time travels and he can't control it. So since he's not the main character, we don't get into the nitty gritty of time travel. And I did that on purpose because time travel, the more you think about it, the more confusing it is. It's just one giant headache. So I don't think I will ever write another time traveling book, which was like it for me, because I always read that you can't write something smarter than you are, and I feel like Glitch pushed the limits. Like my editor was asking for all these clarifications on how the time traveling worked, and I'm like, I don't know. I left that vague for a reason. I didn't want to go into too much detail because I feel like the more you explain with time traveling, the more people can come back and say, well, but what about this? Or well, what about this? So the premise of Glitch is it's set in a future where we have figured out how to time travel. Not everybody, just a select group of people have the ability. They're called glitchers. And they figured out very early that having everyone just time travel whenever they want is a disaster. Because if you really want to screw up the future, you mess up the past. So basically, this story starts with these 2 kids, and they're at an academy, which is hidden and secretive, where they are trained to go into the past, not to change it, but to catch the criminals who are trying to change huge historical events. And this actually came from one of my things I used to teach in 7th grade. A lot of my ideas come from teaching 7th grade. If I ever run out of ideas, I'm just going to have to go back to teaching 7th grade. But we used to do this big research thing where there was this book by Life, and it was called 100 Photographs That Changed the World. And it was basically 100 photographs of these huge historical events. And my kids would have to pick an event and then argue whether or not it was the most important, event that changed the world. And as I'm looking at all these pictures of Martin Luther King and the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire Factory, and the Birmingham bomb, all these things, I said, guys, what if Hitler had won? What would the world look like? And it just mind boggled them. I said, well, what if Abraham Lincoln hadn't been assassinated? How would our history look different if he hadn't been assassinated? So it just started going, well, what would, our history is so touchy. You change one little thing in history and it just sends things off in a different trajectory. So that's kind of where the idea for Glitch came from. So in the story, these kids are training to go back and protect our history, not because it's necessarily perfect. So for example, the opening scene, my character is trying to prevent someone from stopping Abraham Lincoln's assassination, which seems so counterintuitive, right? It seems like we should save that amazing president. But if you look at history, you can't really change it without screwing up everything else. And so that's one of the big things in the story. And they find out something that's going to happen, and they have to break every single rule they've ever been taught in order to save everything they care about. So it's my first book I've ever written from 2 different points of view, which was an interesting challenge for me and was really fun. It's from a girl and a boy, which was fun as well because I wrote, so far, I've had 2 books with a girl protagonist, the Edge of Extinction series, and 2 books with boy protagonists, which were these 2. So it was kind of a way to meet in the middle. It was also my first time writing as a race that was not my own. I have a white girl protagonist and a black boy protagonist. So that was kind of scary as well, except for the fact that race doesn't really play a part in the story. And I wanted a book where I felt like you didn't need to have a book with a character with a different nationality and just have it be about their nationality. They can just be a cool kid having an awesome adventure in a book, which is kind of what Banneker does in your books. I mean, it doesn't really focus on who he is as a person. That's who he is, and he's awesome, right? So it was a little scary, but also really exciting to write from those two different points of view and try something new with the full awareness that I could send it to my editor and have her say, I hate it. You need to rewrite it from one point of view, which totally could have happened and would have been really, really hard.
I live in an interracial family, and race very, very well, it used to never come up. And then the election in 2016 happened. There you go. There's a time travel scenario for you. Go back and stop Donald Trump from getting the sports almanac. Oh, well, moving on. That's a fun Back to the Future reference.
Cannot talk time travel enough.
Let's talk a little bit more about Glitch. Are you going to be using sensitivity readers, or having used sensitivity readers to help you write from a perspective of a race that's not your own?
To some degree, my editors have helped with that. If they think you need a sensitivity reader, they make sure you get one. But with Glitch, because like I said, it's not like race plays a big part in it at all. It's not a part of the discussion or the theme. The theme is about something completely different. It just happens that that's who they are. And so we didn't really have that. I'm going to have a friend of mine read it just for my own sake to make sure I didn't screw anything up royally. But because I just approached it as, I could have had a kid who was blue and it wouldn't have made any difference, in the way the story progressed, which there is a kid that's a guy that's blue in this book. So I've done that. But I do think I will maybe have a sensitivity reader once I get the ARC copies back, the advanced reading copies. I just felt bad sending someone a giant manuscript and be like, hey, could you do me a favor and look through this 300-page Word document? That seemed like a lot. So
I remember when we were doing our critique sessions, and again, this is 2 books back, you had usually you're very stoic. You're like, yes, give it to me, and you take it like a champ because you're a pro. You know that there's going to be stuff that comes at you, but you had your head down on the desk at one point because it was just all the time travel. Oh my God, trying to get the timeline straight, the plots to all agree with each other. I did not envy you. Have you thought about talking animals or sentient animals, some sort of writing from an animal's perspective type of story? Is that in your future?
You sound like my mom. Desperate for me to write something from an animal's point of view. I would love to. And actually, if you look at all of like the stories I wrote as a kid, they're all from like a dog's point of view or a cat's point of view. I was very into that. Someday, I think you'll definitely see something like that from me. But right now, since my middle grade kind of tends towards like the action adventure, slightly older middle grade crowd, not right now. I don't think I'll write anything from an animal. I'd never say never. But because like the Warrior series did that well, right? You can have action adventure and have animals. So maybe we'll see. My next one that I'm working on is not from an animal's point of view. So, and I have a contract for 6 books. So I'm working on book 6. So if HarperCollins says write a couple more books, you might see some animals in there.
Tell me what animals you're thinking of before you get there, so I can make sure that it doesn't that I get the idea that I want before it comes to fact. I've got an animal book. Afterward, I'll tell you about it. Like, that one's mine, Martin. Back off. Cool. Let me ask you a little bit about your process, because here we are. You're working on book 6. How has your process changed from book 1 to now? Have you switched from planner to pantser, or what has changed for you?
I have a lot less time to screw up now, if that makes sense. Because when I wrote Edge of Extinction, I didn't have any kids. I thought I was busy, but I wasn't busy compared to what I am now. So I had a lot of time to just kind of play with things. And if that huge chunk doesn't work, I can just delete it and start over again. Where if I want a book to come out every year, I'm on kind of a tight timeline. I have a few months to write it, a few months to get it to my critique group, a few months to get it to my editor. You got to turn that puppy around and get it going. So I don't have as much time. So do I sit down and do a huge outline? Absolutely not. I'm definitely still a fly by the seat of your pants kind of writer. I will do what I call like a messy planning page, where I just get all my ideas out on paper to kind of figure out what direction I want things to go in, so that I don't make huge, colossal mistakes. Like when I was writing the second Edge of Extinction book, I had to cut about 15,000 words at one point, because I realized I was just taking the book in a really boring direction. They were just wandering around underground. Nothing exciting was happening. And I cut 15,000 words and went back to where the story was working and had dinosaurs bust into the underground area, which is why I realized the story was dull, as I had taken away the part of the story that was super exciting, which was the dinosaur element. So I try not to make huge mistakes like that anymore. But at the same time, when we had our writing group just take a look at book 6 for me, like the little chunk that I gave you guys, I had a 12,000 word chunk that I have not opened up since our critique session. I just started a brand new document and started over again. And I'm at about 15,000 words now. Like, I'm hoping I can pull some elements from that back in. But that might be another one I have to chalk up to, like, well, that was a false start and that was a mistake. So we'll see.
So, I mean, you've got to have some kind of plan, right? I mean, you do a messy outline. So do you know your ending usually?
No, endings are a struggle for me. A real struggle for me to try to figure out how to wrap things up. With the exception of Edge of Extinction, because I had 2 books to get to that ending, that one was easier. Endings are hard. I kind of know what I want my character to figure out, or where I want them to be as a person by the end, what they have to figure out about themselves. Like with Float, I wanted my main character, Emerson, to figure out the importance of kind of living life outside your comfort zone, the importance of friends, the importance of just kind of living his best life. So I knew I wanted him to get there. I didn't know how I was going to get him there. So with Grayson, I wanted him to see the value of mystery, this lifestyle of hoaxing that he had hated his whole life. I wanted him to see value in it, and I wanted him to see that family loyalty is important, and I wanted him to see that keeping some mystery in the world is important. So I wasn't sure how I was going to get him there, but by the end of the book I did. So it's just figuring out, for me, how to make that resolution kind of tie up in a nice bow at the end, once I have my character developed where I want them to go, which is a big thing about middle grade. Middle grade is very much character driven, as far as what your character is figuring out about themselves and overcoming and triumphing over, because middle school is very much about that. These kids are changing who they are. They're changing daily, on what they understand about the world. And it's nice for them to kind of go on a journey with somebody else who's maybe figuring those same things out.
It's funny because people don't know this, that don't attend regular critique sessions with you. But your mind is like, unlike any other author I've ever met, it is like just a repository of middle grade plots and middle grade plot instincts. Because anytime we get stuck, it's Laura who immediately says, do this, this, and this, and the problem is fixed. I've never presented you with a problem in my manuscript that you couldn't immediately fix. I don't know how well it works on your own manuscripts.
That's the thing. Like you wouldn't believe. I can read somebody else's draft and say, well, here's where you went wrong, and here's what you need to fix, because I'm overly opinionated. It's kind of a problem. But with my own books, it's like I can't see my way through the weeds sometimes, which is why that critique group is so important. Because I feel like when you write your stuff, it's almost too precious to you. You start to get too attached to certain things, where your writing group can say, that's junk, that's fine, keep this. So it's nice to have people who can do that for you when you can't do it for yourself.
And I know you still write at night, right after all the kids are in bed?
I write at night. Actually, I do more of my writing now in the morning. I wake up at 5 a.m. every day, 7 days a week. And I would wake up later, but I have a kid that wakes up between 5:45 and 6 o'clock every single day. So I wake up, I have my coffee program go off at 4:45 in the morning, so it's ready when I walk down the stairs. And I literally just get out of my bed in my pajamas, grab my laptop and a cup of coffee, and I work until that kid comes down the stairs. Then I start my day. Because he is a ninja. He will hear you get dressed. He will hear water running, anything. So I just walk directly down the stairs and work, because at the end of the day, after watching 3 kids and all the things that life entails with the running around and whatnot, I'm mentally just like drained. I'm done. I can't think intelligent thoughts, I feel like, a lot of the time. So I would sit down to write at night, and I would just stare at this blank page, and I would get very far. And I was almost kind of resentful because I felt like I should get to take a break at the end of the day, you know, after being up since 5:45 with a kid. And I have 3 kids, so it's not like nap time is a thing anymore, which is a bummer. So I try to get that chunk in the morning. If I can get an hour, I'm winning. When my brain is up and awake and alert, and if I wake up really foggy, I'll actually jump in a freezing cold shower, because there's a lot of science behind the fact that that wakes you up like nothing else. You'd be amazed. If you jump in a freezing cold shower, you don't need coffee. It's like you got hit by a lightning bolt. So if I can get
staying in there and actually washing your hair, or
no,
is it just they wake you up and then a real shower later?
You can. You just jump in that freezing cold shower and you stand in as long as you can, then you jump out and you're wide awake. It's amazing. So if I can get that chunk of productivity done in the morning, I feel so much better about the rest of my day, about doing the mom thing where I can't sit down and work if I've got those words in the morning.
So how are you setting your goals these days? Because I know you're a very goal-oriented person. Are you doing word counts? Are you doing sections? How are you holding yourself to task and putting out books as regularly as you are?
I set goals for myself every week. I kind of sit down and I plan out my week as far as everything from like what my family's going to eat for meals to chores I want to get done. And then I also have a chunk that's book goals for the week. And sometimes the word count, like I'd like to get 5,000 words done on this book that I'm working on. Sometimes it's businessy kind of stuff. Like I want to send 5 emails out to see if I can get author visits to these schools. Or I want to write a letter to this podcast and send them a box of books kind of thing, see if I can get on it. Things like that. So I always have a list. Do I get to all of it every week? No. Like this past week, I was super excited because I was like, it's the first full week of preschool. I've got kids, all my kids in school for 2 days a week for 2 full hours each day. Like, it's going to be awesome. I'm going to get all this stuff done. And then both boys got fevers for the entire week and didn't sleep all week, and the whole week was shot. So you kind of have to adjust your expectations based off your life a little bit. But setting goals is super helpful. That's how I got Edge of Extinction written, is I said, you know what? I want to have a book published before I'm 30. So then I have to take the steps to do it. Same thing with these books. If I have to have it done by November, I need to get my butt in gear and get it written, kind of thing.
Makes sense. You get it done like nobody else I know. No, I don't know anybody that writes faster than you. Certainly not in our group. I know there's a few other authors out there in the world, but they're not writing as fast and as good. There's some of them just writing fast.
I think it's survival. If I don't write fast and well the first time through, it's not going to happen, because I just have so little time in my life. It's kind of crazy right now. Like I said, I've got a kid who wakes up before 6 a.m. every day.
Just not fair.
No. The other 2 sleep 12 hours a night. I don't know how I managed to get this one.
Oh, I have had to give up on my early morning sessions just because I've been trying them for a while, and every time I get up early, the kid hears me. I have to walk by his room in order to get to the front of the house. He'll smell the coffee, and then it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
So I just finally said, all right, well, what's happening is every day I'm getting up 2 hours earlier than I really need to, and now I'm just 2 hours tired when I finally have a chance to sit down and write. So now we just get up at the same time, and I found another time to write. Here's a fun question for you. Of all the books, because your books are all of them very, what's the word I'm looking for? Not cinematic, but certainly would lend themselves to being incredible movies. I mean, you deal with big, high concept ideas that we'd all love to see at the local cinema. So of the books you've written so far, up to and including Glitch, but not the 6th mystery book that only I can know about at this moment, which of these books would you most like to see made into a movie thus far?
I would love to see the Edge of Extinction series made into a movie. Even though that's the first books that I wrote, which I feel like I've gotten better with each book that I've churned out, kind of thing. Just the visuals of the dinosaurs and the treehouse village and the underwater lab and all the things that are in that book, I would just love to see that. It was so cool to see it on a cover, an image from your book. I can imagine what seeing a full movie would be like. I think the Edge of Extinction would be fabulous as a movie. HOAX for Hire would be great as well. Float would be super fun. I could see Float as like a Netflix series for this camp every single year. But Fingers are crossed. I mean, that's the dream, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know. I go back and forth on that because on the one hand, I've already got a perfect movie in my head that goes along with the book I wrote. I've done my version. So unless I'm allowed to come in and direct it and play all the parts and compose the music and do every last job, it's not going to be my version. So it would be really swell if it worked out and it was like I don't know, I always thought the Harry Potter adaptations were pretty dead on for the most part. And if it were that, then great. If it's, on the other hand, if it's the Dark Tower, what a terrible movie version of a beloved series of books of mine. And in that case, I would almost rather not have a movie.
I know. When I taught, I always told the kids, like, don't watch the movie because the movie ruins the book. It does. But you can always hope you get the unicorn where you get the movie that does your book justice. But it would be so neat to see Edge of Extinction on the big screen.
Oh, I'd be pumped. I'd be right there in the front row, ready to go.
Yeah. It's Jurassic Park for kids who aren't ready for Jurassic Park, right? Who aren't ready for the guts and the gore and the violence of that movie. It's just, but still love dinosaurs. It's right there. So
there's still plenty of dinosaur chasing. Who knows for the movie version? Maybe a little bit of blood. Who knows? Although that'd be another one that would lend itself to a great Netflix series. If they could find the budget.
Yeah, they're doing an animated Jurassic Park Netflix series. I've had so many people tell me about it. Awesome, not my book, but still cool.
I'm hoping it's gonna be good. I don't know. Did you see Crawl yet?
Did I see what?
Crawl?
No.
Oh, it's my movie of the year. I've become evangelical about this. It's my favorite movie. It's when you get a chance, it's better, I think, than any of the Jurassic Park sequels. It's just such a great premise for a story. So it's a hurricane in Florida next to a fella and his daughter get stuck in their basement, the crawl space, during a hurricane, and they've got kind of open brick, so the water's flowing through. And in the meantime, they're living next to an alligator farm. So all the alligators have overflowed from the farm and are all around and stuck down there in the crawl space with them. Woo! Oh, man.
Oh, well, you heard about the alligator that was in Chicago, right?
Uh-huh.
Yep. I thought that I'm originally from the Chicago area-ish, so I was like, wait, there's an alligator in Chicago, but we're getting off topic. But
oh, wait, no, it was the crocodile I saw in Ohio. What happened in Chicago?
There was a crocodile that we saw in one of the little parks. They named him Chance the Snapper. People had T-shirts. It was a whole thing. They caught him. They brought in an expert. He's like a 4 foot long, probably somebody's pet that they got, tired of. They just let go in the pond.
I'll tell you what, I don't know how one would ever survive a Chicago winter. I don't know how I survived a Chicago winter when I lived there.
It wouldn't have survived.
Well, what if to ask you just a little bit more about marketing? I won't keep you all night because I know you've got a 5 a.m. Wake up call, and you've got a big day tomorrow with your book launch. Although through the magic of time travel, it is tomorrow for esteemed audience. The book is available now. Go get your copy of Hoax for Hire. But let's talk about your plans for launching. What are you doing to launch Hoax for Hire other than being on this amazing podcast and letting everybody know it's available?
I've done so many different things to launch a book over the last few years. Some have been great and some have been such duds. But I have, one of the things, my favorite things that I do is I have connected with my local library, the Zionsville Public Library, and we do a big launch event for each one of my books where kids can sign up. They provide a fun themed snack. I do a big book talk involving my book. So, for example, for this one, I'm talking about the crazy cryptids that went into the book and the research that went into the book, and then we have a local independent bookstore, the 4Kids bookstore, come in and sell books. And it's just a fabulous event. My first Edge of Extinction event was good. The second one was gangbusters because I had done so many author visits in the area that all these kids who had seen me in schools came, and it was just, I felt like I'd made it, right? Because I had a line in my signing table, which if you do a signing at a local bookstore, you feel like a used car salesman half the time. So that was really neat. So that's my favorite thing that I do. Does it sell hundreds of books? No. It sells 40 to 50 books on launch day. But I love it because it's, my local community. It's a 5-minute drive. I get a chance to talk to all these kids. So I love that. One of the other things that I started doing the last couple of years is reaching out to Instagram like influencers kind of thing, and not book Instagrammers, which is what I feel like a lot of book people do is they find like the book Instagram accounts and that's who they send their stuff to. And for young adult books, I think that's great. They have a bigger following on social media by their readers. So for what I mean is if a young adult book goes up on social media, the chances of their readers seeing it are really high. Versus if you put your middle grade book up on social media, a lot of the times the people who are buying those middle grade books aren't following those book bloggers. So a lot of the people that I reach out to are like lifestyle mom bloggers who have kids who are in the right age group for my books. And a lot of times there are people that I've followed for years and have had back and forth conversations with. So when I reach out and say, hey, by the way, I'm a middle grade author, can I send you, one of my books? And I never ask them to publicize it. I never ask them to post about it. I just send it, and sometimes they do, and they'll say, look at this cool book we got, or look, my kid is really enjoying this book. And if they have 10,000 followers, that's like free advertising, right? And it's a more authentic free advertising to other moms who might be in that same look for a book. I heard somewhere, like, you have to have your book seen like an obscene amount of times before someone will pull the trigger and buy it. It's like 5 or 6 times, which is so daunting because how in the world are you going to get your book in front of people that many times?
I heard 7.
Yeah, I mean, it's time, right? So how are you supposed to do that? So I've been reaching out to Instagram bloggers. I send them like cool author, you've gotten some of my fun swag stuff before. So for this one, for example, I send a little Nessie ladle. You can see here. For
those of you who are listening to the podcast instead of watching it, it's a ladle for soup, but with Nessie's head on it and little feet. My son has been walking this around the furniture all afternoon. I've had it up high. Oh, I think you gave this to me a couple of months ago, and I was so excited about it. And I had it up high where he couldn't reach it, and I took it down today to get ready for the show. And of course, it's got little teeth marks on it. So a huge hit with 5-year-olds.
Yeah, that's a great, Instagram moment, right? You put your sea monster ladle in your soup you're making, and how cute. And actually, I've heard there's a lady who has an Instagram account and a huge following just with her soup ladle that she takes pictures of places the soup ladle goes. Another thing I send out, like for this book, I did a little Nessie bookmark that goes in the top that's really cute. I bought a bunch of, which I don't think you got these because I just recently found them. I put like a Yeti or a Bigfoot bumper sticker kind of thing in.
Oh, I didn't get one. This interview is over. That looks sweet.
I have some awesome so I was able to find, a pack of 12 of these on Amazon, so I just tuck one of those in the book. A couple people, I only was able to find 2 of these last Christmas. I have little Yetis that went out to 2 people. That they're huge. So reaching out to some influencers has been helpful because people hear about your book, and so they might not buy your book when they hear about it, but next time they're wandering around Barnes & Noble, they may go, oh, I heard about this one, honey. Why don't you check this one out? So your odds are better that someone might catch your book on the shelf. I've done...
The person you gave the swag to, every time I'm making soup, I'm going to look at this and I'm going to think fond thoughts like, Laura Martin. I haven't talked to, I won't think that because I will have talked to you for recently. But somebody might think, I wonder if she's written any new books a year or two. Oh, Glitch, I haven't read that one. I remember Laura gave me this great thing. Let me check out her new book that makes you a big hit with them forever, right? A raving fan.
One of my best marketing things I ever did was reach out to the Read Aloud Revival podcast. This is before you had a podcast. But I reached out to her when I just had Edge of Extinction out and said, like, hey, I know I'm a nobody, but I'd love to be on your podcast. I used to teach. Here's some of the things I could talk about. And she had me on her podcast. Her podcast has been downloaded like over 1 million times. Not my specific episode, but just in general. So, and it's reaching, her audience is not necessarily writers, it's moms who are trying to find books for their kids. So a lot of times people get very wrapped up in the social media of book Instagram, where at the same time you need to think about who's looking at all those book Instagram. It might be other writers. It might just be a lot of other authors. But you want to look at who's your market. My market is moms. I'm trying to find moms who are looking for books for reluctant readers, which is really my pitch, is that my books are really good for the kids who don't like reading, because that was one of my big passions when I wrote them. So I'm looking to market to moms who have kids who might not be into reading yet. So where do I find those moms at? And actually, one of the most successful things that I do sometimes, which sounds so stupid, it's very small scale, but if you go to a bookstore, you go to Barnes & Noble and you set up and do a book signing, like I said, you're like a used car salesman. It's very hard to get anyone to make eye contact, let alone approach your table to check out your books. Versus if I just walk into Barnes & Noble and like scout out my books on the shelf and grab them to sign them and bring them up to the front desk, I sell those books by hand every single time. Like they never get put back on the shelf. Someone will hear me talking to, the person behind the counter, asking for the author sign, and they'll be like, wait, who are you? What are these books? And I'll stand there and pitch these books, and literally I will do an Instagram post or, on Instagram stories, be like, hey, I'm walking in, Barnes & Noble in Noblesville, and I'm going to sign books, and I'll have to be like, sorry, there's no signed books. They all just sold. So just lurking around bookstores, carrying your books around, sells books every time. Whereas if you sit behind a table, all of a sudden you're a salesperson and nobody wants to talk to you, which I think is very weird, but it's true.
It is. I'm an author. I've been at that table trying to sell books, and if I walk into a Barnes and Noble and I see somebody has a table with the book I'm not interested in, I do the I can't see you. I'm gonna keep walking.
Yeah.
Excuse me, man. I did do a signing once with somebody who's the best hand seller I've ever seen, where she would walk up, she would meet somebody as they were walking wherever they were in the aisle and put her book in their hand as they were talking or as she was introducing herself. She'd say, hi, and they've already got the book in their hand. And she'd say, read the first paragraph of this book and tell me it's not a story that grabs you. And who's going to say no? Obviously the author. But I felt like that was too great a social cost to pay for the sale of one book. Because, yeah, she sold most of the books. She did that. But I felt dirty watching it. I don't know. Maybe she didn't feel bad. But I felt like, it's not okay.
Signings at bookstores have been when I have something else to talk about. For example, there was one signing for Edge of Extinction where they set me up front, which I prefer than, like, don't stick me in the corner where I don't see anybody. Stick me in the front or stick me in the children's section. And they were doing a big summer reading thing that day. So as people came in the door, instead of saying like, hi, here's my book, could you please buy this? I was like, hey, have you heard about our summer reading program? And I like brought them in that way. And then I'd say, I'm here, I'm an author, I'm promoting my book today, this is it, blah, blah. So it was a much more natural way to kind of feed into things. So if you can do a book signing where it's tied into something like that and you have a shtick for why you're there and you're not just the person selling books, that's helpful. The other thing is try not to be there for hours and hours and hours. I made that mistake one time. A bookstore said, hey, could you come in from, I want to say it was like 8 to 1. I was there for like 5 hours. And I sold all my books, but at the same time, like 5 hours of time to move 20 books was like, I could have been writing a lot in those 5 hours. Time is really limited. So if you're going to do a book signing, keeping it to 1 to 2 hours max. Plus, like you said, it's draining to do those kind of pitches on you, and you start to lose your enthusiasm by the end of hour 2, and people can tell that. So
I don't, generally speaking, I don't even do that as much anymore, just because anytime I've done it, I sold my whole stack of books. Great, I feel swell. But then I'll pull up my online accounts and see how many books I sold passively, not doing anything. During that same period of time. So, I could have been writing. I could have been doing a lot of different things with that time. In fact, I forgot to mention this at the start of the show. If you're in Indianapolis, I will be at Comic-Con this coming weekend. What is that? That's the August 30th, August 31st, and September 1st. Come out, come see me. I'm going to be there. Ron Perlman's going to be there. Kate Beckinsale, lots of famous people. The fella who does the voice of my favorite cowboy, John Marston, in Red Dead Redemption, he's going to be there. But the whole reason I brought that up is I can't wait. I'm going to say, Mr. Marston, what was it like to be the cowboy that shot everybody? Because I really like being the cowboy. Did you like it too? He's going to get away. You're a grown man. But yeah, but the game though was so amazing. But the reason I bring that is I'm not going to take any books. They offered me, like, do you want to sit and do a signing? I'm like, no, I'm going to give everybody a card. I'm going to let everybody know where you can find me, middlegradeninja.com. Check out the podcast. And then I'm going to go talk to the guy that's doing Red Dead Redemption. I don't want to sit there and sign books. Rob Perlman's going to be there. I got to track him down and ask him about Sons of Anarchy. I'm going to be busy. So what are some marketing pitfalls that you've come across? What are some things you've done that you've learned not to do because they just didn't get you that ROI you're looking for?
Like I said, the 5-hour book signing was a lot and draining, and I walked away not feeling like it was a win. Doing author visits for free were one of the things that I've discovered is not necessarily a great use of your time. I did a lot of them for free right when my first book came out, and I don't regret them. Some of them were great, and some of them were not so great. I feel like if a school has zero skin in the game, they're a lot less likely to promote you, to do pre-orders, things like that. I walked into classrooms where the kids had zero idea who I was, what books I'd written. The librarian or the teacher had said, "Oh, I was supposed to do pre-orders. That was me," even though I'd followed up on them 5 or 6 times. So I would move 0 books. The kids had no idea who I was. It's not like the teacher had prepped them or read a chapter or anything like that. So I've discovered, even if the school's only paying for my gas to get there, if they have something invested in it, they're going to put a lot more effort into making it a good visit. So school visits for free would be one of the things that I would say, unless it's a really great opportunity and they're really going to, pre-order books and really do it well. I would maybe avoid them a little bit. Other things, like I said, I send books to influencers. Sometimes I send a great big beautiful box of books of goodies and all the things, and they don't mention it. And it's just, sorry. And sometimes it's even people who I've reached out to and said, like, "Hey, can I send these to you?" And nope, they don't mention them. I actually saw one book like on a shelf in someone's Instagram book post. I'm like, so they got them. They just chose not to mention them, which is fine. And you're going to have dead ends like that. I've reached out to a few different like award kind of things and said, "Hey, can I send you guys books just to consider?" Sure, you send them, you never hear anything back. But that's all par for the course. You might send out 10 things that have nothing happen and one thing that had a great return on your effort. So marketing-wise, that's been one of those things. I'm trying to think what else I've done. I've done a Facebook ad. I paid a videographer to put together kind of like a preview thing for one of my books and did it on Facebook. I don't think I had a great return on that for the money that I put into it. I don't think it was worth it. But again, it was one of those things I wanted to try and see and throw it at the wall and see if it stuck. And I think if you are afraid to fail, you're never going to find something that works. It's kind of like with writing. You have to be okay to have some writing that stinks because you're going to get to something better. So I feel like the longer I've been doing this, the better I've gotten at marketing my books and figuring out what's worth your time and what's the best bang for your buck. But again, I'm probably going to make mistakes along the way and miss marketing as well. And just hope that some of them go well and, do your best from there.
I would love to talk to the person whose plan is to go through life and not make mistakes. You let me know how you're going to pull that off. and then teach me. Well, Laura, I've got so many more questions for you, but one, I know I'm going to see you again probably next summer when we're talking about Glitch. And two, I know that it's getting late and you're going to be launching a book all day tomorrow. So instead of asking you my usual last question, which is advice you have for writers, because I feel like we nailed it our last conversation, go back in the archives, esteemed audience. Check out episode 1, author Laura Martin. You get twofold. You get 1, the joy of more Laura, and 2, you'll get to hear hopefully how much I've improved over 35 episodes from that shaky first episode, which by the way, longest transition to a question ever. But I really do have to thank you because I couldn't have been luckier that you were my first guest. If I'd done somebody else where the onus was on me to be a better host than I was, I don't know that there would have been a second episode, but because it was you and you came in all poised and professional and ready to go and you had good stories and great advice to share, I was standing back half the episode being like, wow, this is a really good episode. I must really be onto something here. So thank you so much for being a great guest, and you're welcome back. Every time you have a new book, I expect that you and I are going to get together and chat about it. For tonight, what is the most recent craft book that you've read? What are some craft books that you'd recommend and resources that you'd recommend for authors that have made a big difference for you and will make a big difference for them?
The one that I most recently finished was Creativity Inc. which was by one of the founders of Pixar, which was really interesting. The cover is what got me. The cover has the silhouette of Buzz Lightyear, like conducting an orchestra, which I think is just a brilliant cover. But he talks a lot about the creativity that went into creating that company and how they fostered creativity within it. And I learned two things from that book. One thing we actually talked about is that you cannot be afraid of failure. That failure is just part of being creative. That it's in the web of it, and that if you're not failing, you're not really creating. And that even the best creators have failures, and it's fine. You have to kind of allot for that. And the other thing is I really would like to work for Pixar. They sound fabulous. The way they approach ideas and people and the way that they run their whole company. They had a whole day where literally no one was supposed to do anything but come up with ways to make Pixar better. And they just had a huge brainstorm of every single person there trying to figure out how to make their company better and fix the problems within it, which I think is just brilliant. So many times companies don't do that. They just keep marching forward with the problems that they have. So that one is really great. I love Middle Grade Ninja blog. I'm not just saying that because it's you. It's one of the things I've been following for years, since before I was published, just because it's a wealth of resources. Your podcast, I was listening to before we got on here. You have your clips episode, which is like 3 hours long, which is like committing to an audiobook, but it was worth it. You said
3.5 hours.
Authors, which is great. So one of the other blogs that I always recommend when people, and it's so funny, I get emails all the time of people wanting me to help them get published and explain how to get published, which I'm always like, it's, you know, the internet's out there now. Like there's so many resources that I feel like I didn't even have when I started. But Janet Reed is a literary agent, and she has 2 blogs which I think are incredibly useful to people who are just trying to get published. One is called Query Shark, where she lets writers submit their query letters, and then she just rips them to shreds and tells them where it didn't work or where it is working and where she would have stopped reading and why this isn't working. And I read the entire backlog of that when I was trying to get published. I mean, I read everything she'd ever written, trying to figure out how to write that perfect query letter. And then she has another blog that's just under her own name, where writers can submit questions about the publishing world, and then she answers, you know, what to do and what not to do. So I feel like a lot of getting published is not making stupid mistakes and knowing what to do and how not to bug somebody and make somebody mad. So that was a huge, and I still read her blog literally every day, even though a lot of it has to do with getting published. She has little nuggets of information that have saved me from sticking my foot in it more times than I can count. So she's one of my favorite resources for people who are trying to get published. And then just reading books in your genre. So I try to read a lot of middle grade and young adult, trying to see what other people are doing, and then not trying to jump on the trends of what people are doing right now. And actually, you talked about that in one of your podcasts a little bit ago about how, you know, when Twilight was out, if you were trying to also write a book about sparkly vampires, you know, your sparkly vampire book was going to come out 3 years after the trend had ended. So you really can't try to chase trends in publishing, because publishing is so slow. By the time your book comes out, the trend is old news and tired, and nobody wants to read that kind of stuff anymore. You have to kind of just write the stuff that sets your heart on fire, that you get excited by, that you find really interesting, and hope your reader feels the same.
And that you've got to be excited enough about to not only do multiple drafts of, but to still be excited about it, you know, a year, 2 years later when you're finally on podcast talking about it, right?
Yeah. You're like, okay, what was that book about that I wrote 2.5 years ago?
Oh, please, let me quickly reread this thing.
Ordering I had this in my Amazon cart for 2 years, and I've always like pulled it out, because you know how your Amazon cart like price goes up and up, and you're like pulling the things out that you don't really need. I've been pulling this guy out and my little Bigfoot action figure out for 2 years, and then finally I was like, oh, I have my launch in like a week. I finally need them.
Essential, really.
Like, guys, because I like to use a lot of visuals when I do author visits, especially to schools. I don't ever hand them around to kids, because that's a distraction. Someone will get whacked in the head with Bigfoot. But I do like to have visuals, because especially the younger kids you have, sometimes I'm talking to 3rd graders or 2nd graders, they need something, whether it's a PowerPoint behind you or something in your hand that you're using to, you know, describe what a dinosaur looks like. They need stuff. So I always like to have dinosaurs. For book 2 of Edge of Extinction, you know, I had this guy, which I'm actually going to be using him again. This one, I've got my Yeti, who's going to come around to all my little author events. He'll be able to sit on my author table. So I like having stuff. that I bring a whole extra bag of stuff when I do an author visit. One of my other things I'm doing for this author visit, coming up here, this guy, which is Monsters in America, and it's a United States map, and it has all the different cryptids in it. Just because I think kids don't realize how many cryptids are out there until you start talking about all the places that they are, and especially when you talk about the ones that are in their own state, I think kids get really excited.
Well, that reminds me, I looked up my favorite cryptid because I was like, well, I've never thought about that because I knew I was going to ask you about yours. And I did some hunting around, and it never occurred to me. One, the answer is right away the Mothman is my favorite of the cryptids. But my other favorite, who I didn't realize was a cryptid, is the devil. But the devil shows up all kinds of places. I'm like, how do you not pick the devil? Satan himself, my God. That's the cryptid you want. Apparently he's out there walking around. So watch yourself at night, people. Be safe. If you're walking while you listen to this podcast, maybe pull out an earbud, look around, make sure the devil's not breathing down your neck, make sure the Mothman's not trying to get your attention. Mm-hmm. This podcast is going to save lives, Laura. Well, Laura, where can esteemed audience find you online and stalk you and buy all of your books?
All the books are on Amazon. They're all on the Barnes & Noble website. Pretty much anywhere books are sold, you're going to find mine, which is great. I have an author website, which is lauramartinbooks.com, which I don't update nearly as often as I should. Like I said, my writing time is limited, so if I'm going to spend a lot of time writing something, it's usually not a blog post. But there are some good ones on there with cover reveals and things like that and behind-the-scenes stuff. I'm on Instagram under the same handle, Laura Martin Books. I'm also on Facebook under that same name. I kind of kept my handle the same across the boards. I stole John Green's idea when I was trying to figure out my author social media presence. He's John Green Books. And so I'm just Laura Martin Books. I just jumped on that train because Laura Martin is a very common name. And in publishing, there's another Laura Martin who does romance. There's another Laura Martin who does something else. And every now and then I get their stuff sent my way. So I wanted to keep it simple. So Laura Martin Books across all platforms.
Excellent. And of course, you can always find me at middlegradeninja.com. If you head there to check out the footnotes for this episode, we're going to have not just a link to Laura's previous episode number 1. We're going to have a link to a guest post that Laura wrote about arranging school visits and tips for that. We're going to have a link to our original 7-question interview. We'll have a link to a crazy survey that all the cannibals did at one point, just for fun. All kind of plethora of Laura Martin information available for you at middlegradeninja.com. If you're in Indianapolis, make sure you come out to the Indiana Comic Convention this weekend. Again, August 30th to 31st and the September 1st. Come out, see me, see the guy that does the voice of John Marsden in Red Dead Redemption. It's going to be an amazing time. Make sure you come back on Thursday for author Sharon M. Draper. Come back on Saturday for Dan Gutman. And keep tabs for all the great episodes that are coming in the future. Laura, something we started doing after episode 1, when I was just figuring out what the heck this thing even was. At that point, I was still calling it Middle Grade Ninja TV because it never occurred to me that somebody might want to listen to the podcast. So lots of changes since then. But one thing we've done is I added a very professional sounding sign-off phrase that totally explains why the show is called Middle Grade Ninja. And that sign-off phrase is hi-ya and what have you. When you sign us off?
Hi-ya and what have you.